And welcome back to the shop, everyone. We're going to make a super cool knife today using the canister pattern welded Damascus method. This is going to be a canoe canister just like last time. This allows us to index our materials in a horizontal fashion, which can be very useful depending on the type of pattern you're going to create and the materials that you're working with. So I'm welding up the caps on both ends of the can here and then cutting out the top of the canoe. The inside will be coated in white paint. That'll keep the contents from welding to the can. Part of the constituents of this canister is going to be some 52-100 steel, excellent blade steel, excellent edge steel, which is what it's going to be in this case, the edge of our knife. So I need to forge that into a square bar of specific dimensions, and I'll need 3 of those to put in the bottom of the canister. Once this is all forge welded together and forged down into a blade, this will constitute the edge of our knife. For the rest of the blade, I want some cool pattern welded steel using this nickel plated roller chain, basically bicycle chain, but it is nickel plated, which is going to provide a good contrasting pattern in the finished blade. Now you can see I can't cut through it with these nippers, and that is indicating that it's hardened steel, so it has to have at least 0.3-0.4% carbon, and probably around 0.5-0.6. I'm not sure, I don't know, and that's why I'm not using it for the edge of the blade. But it is definitely hardenable steel, and it's going to have some good characteristics for the body of the blade, and it'll make a cool pattern for us, I hope. So cutting pieces to fit down in here, and I'm trying to get as many pieces of this roller chain into the canister as I can. I wanted to index them all in the fashion that you see those 3 there, but I couldn't fit them all the way across, and so I had to put one on its side. And that'll be okay, but the way that you put your materials into this canister is going to affect how the pattern shows up in the end. Once I've got as many pieces of roller chain in this canister as I can fit, I'm filling up the voids with 1084 powdered steel. Now this steel is going to show up dark in our finished etch at the end of this process, and that'll be good because the chain again is nickel plated, and that'll show up as a bright silver color. Making sure that that's all packed down with no air pockets, using the Sawzall to help with that. We can weld the cap or the top of the canoe on, and everything's in there nice and tight so it doesn't flop around and there's no air pockets. And then we can heat it up and press it together in the forge. This should forge weld everything together with the heat and the pressure together. And the nice thing about a canister is that you don't have to worry about the atmosphere, and so you don't have to put any flux on your steel. It's protected from the oxygen, and everything should go together pretty nicely. I'm completing the forge welding process multiple times to try to make sure that we have a good solid billet before we move on. There's our finished forge welded billet. Let that cool down a little bit, and then we can start cutting the jacket or the canister off of the billet. This should come right off. That white paint has titanium dioxide in it, which creates a non-welding barrier, and with a few cuts here and there, it comes right out. I have to be careful to make sure that I forge this in the proper indexing and drop forge there, because as you recall, our blade steel is only on one side of this billet. So if I'm not careful, I could put our roller chain side on the edge, and that would be bad. As I begin forging our billet down, one of the worst things that a smith can see, and that is the pieces of steel delaminating or coming apart. It was not fully forge welded in the canister in the first forge welding process. Fortunately, I saw it right away and was able to get flux on it immediately, and then we put it back in the forge, heat it up to forge welding temperature, and we'll try to forge weld these pieces together. 52-100 and also steels like 51-60 don't really like to forge weld together to each other very well to the same steel because of that chromium content. That sort of makes it more difficult to forge weld together. That's what we have here. We have 3 pieces of 52-100 that we're trying to forge weld together, but with the appropriate heat and protection from atmosphere, technically you can forge weld almost anything. And so you can see how much flame I have shooting out of the forge there, cranking that thing up to get enough heat to get this to go together and stay together. So multiple passes in and out, and hopefully we've got this to where we've got a good solid piece of steel. Continue on the power hammer to get some force and pressure on there, and it looks like everything went together fine. So I can cut the billet off the end there and create a nice angle for us to begin forging our edge into this piece of steel. Now this is not a sanmai, this is simply a composite blade, and one nice thing about doing it this way is that when one half or one side of the blade is edge steel and then the top half or top side is your patterned and tough steel, you don't have to worry about keeping things perfectly centered as you do with a sanmai, because that edge steel is all the way across on the thickness of the blade. Got it all forged, and we'll begin doing heat treating processes here. And then finally a quench to harden the steel. Once we have it tempered, we can begin grinding. Up to this point, there's been no grinding done. We've just forged the bevel in and the profile of the blade, and of course the tang as well. Start by cleaning up the profile on the grinder. And it wasn't too long before I noticed that we still had some D-lam right here in the middle of the blade. That was concerning, because if that goes all the way through our edge steel, that could end this project right here. But fortunately, I was able to grind it out and kept most of the blade. So we still have a great blade profile and got that ground out to where we don't have any D-lam left on the edge there. I left the blade pretty thick actually, and that was helpful because this allows you to hone everything in and get the profile where you want it to. And I had to do some more grinding on one side than the other, but the profile turned out pretty nice. So we have a hand sanded blade here, and it's ready to go into the etch to reveal our pattern. But first I'm going to do an edge test. Why? Because I'm curious and it's fun. I'm going to buff this out to a razor sharp polished edge, and then we're going to do something that you should never do with any of your knives. Piece of brass for a backstop, if you will. I couldn't find my 16 penny nails, but I got some 8 penny nails. They're not super big. They're about 3/32, not quite an 1/8 inch thick, but they're steel. They happen to be galvanized, and we're going to chop through them with this edge. I want to see what happens. Will the edge hold up? Didn't lose any steel. Actually, it looks just like we've got just a little bit of a scuff there, so we're going to go for round 2. Now this is a full flat ground blade, and it's got what I would consider an appropriate edge thickness and geometry for a general purpose blade. Not so thick as to be ineffective, but also thick enough to handle chopping through 8 penny nails, apparently. This is 50-100 steel that I've quenched in Parks 50 in this case. I'm going to have to do some additional experimenting with this, because typically I use AAA and that gets your full hardness, but could there be some additional benefit? I don't know. Well, I think that passed the edge retention and toughness general edge test. So we're going to continue on, create some shoulders to fit our guard up against here, and we're going to do a brass guard. And this is actually my first take on this. I went with an 1/8 inch piece of steel, kind of going for a traditional Northwoods blade style, and then I kind of messed that up, so I had to go with the second attempt, 3/16 inch thick this time. I think it'll turn out pretty good. Into the ferric chloride, we've got to etch this blade to bring out the pattern that we have. Hopefully it's going to show up nicely and give us a good pattern on our blade. I've got to clean the oxides off in between every time I take it out of the edge, multiple times. We've got a piece of desert ironwood to fit up for the handle, and we'll get epoxy set up in there and everything together nice and tightly. Put it in the clamp, let it set for a while, and then I can install the pin through the tang, which reaches almost the full length of the handle, and that'll provide a super strong mechanical bond or lock for this knife construction. This is a 5/32 pin set in with epoxy and peened over with the hammer, and that'll keep everything nice and tight. We can grind that off flush and everything is going to stay where it's supposed to be. All we have to do now is get this handle shaped up, sanded and finished and polished, and we'll have ourselves a knife. I'm going to show you pictures of the whole knife in just a second here, but last and not least, we have a paper towel tube sharpness test. Alright, thanks for watching. If you like videos like this, subscribe for more. See you guys in the next video.